Welcome, everyone, to the Captive Audience. It is the 8th of September in 2025. I am Kevin Hoare, or as it states clearly below, it's MOGA time. What is MOGA? Make Oregon Great Again. That's right. There's still a chance to do that. We just have to actually be all about doing that. And right now, the people who are running Oregon are doing exactly the opposite. And I'm going to actually go into quite some detail about that today. But first, let's hit a few national headlines that are worthy of note here. So there's been a number of court cases flying around. Every time there is a court case that's challenging the Trump administration's actions, it does seem to result in either more clarity about what the law does and does not say, or a victory for Trump. Pretty much the same thing. Because in the end, time after time, all the Democrats have been doing is judge shopping. They find an Obama or Biden judge and they get them to issue a nationwide injunction based on something that they say they think needs to be blocked nationwide, only to be reversed by an appeals court or the Supreme Court. And that is what seems to be happening right now. And the latest example of this, President Trump, as you know, during the riots in LA a couple of months ago, ordered the National Guard, activated them and ordered them to defend federal facilities in Los Angeles, which effectively supported the Los Angeles police in their efforts to quell those riots. Now, the mayor did everything she could to interfere with that. And that also seems to be a pattern around the country. And we're seeing it repeat elsewhere. But the court challenge that was trying to block President Trump from actually doing what he needed to do in Los Angeles has now been overturned by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has said that this lower court judge cannot suspend, while trial is underway, the president's ability to act under his what President Trump believes are his lawful powers. Now, that also suggests something else. Whenever a court makes this decision, they make this decision either based on the narrowness of what a local district court and the federal level should be having jurisdiction over, or the likelihood that the Trump administration will prevail and therefore need not have their actions suspended. And this is what has happened in the case of the Los Angeles ICE raids and using the National Guard to protect ICE officers in carrying out their federal duties. And it pretty much spells it out chapter and verse in the Constitution and in federal law that this is what the president has the power to do. Democrats keep calling it a violation of posse comitatus and so on and so forth, but it's actually bogus. It's BS, and they keep saying it, but it's not accurate because the National Guard is not acting as police officers. And in the case of D.C., Washington, D.C., they're acting in support of the police officers who are, in fact, doing the policing. So switching gears, Washington, D.C. is a place where the federal government has special powers. It is the District of Columbia, which is the nation's capital, is not a state. And its local government is subservient to the governance of the national government because it is the government seat. And so right now, there's been a complete plummet in murders and in crime overall in the District of Columbia. And that was after, frankly, some pretty horrific stuff that was going on a daily basis in Washington, D.C., including one of the Doge guys known as Big Balls getting beat up when he tried to defend his girlfriend from a group of thugs. And several weeks earlier, a gentleman who was, he was an intern for Republican Representative Ron Estes from Kansas. His name was Eric Tarpinian Yakum. And he was a 21-year-old University of Massachusetts Amherst student. And he was shot to death just walking down the sidewalk about a mile from the White House. Minding his own business, not in a high crime area, but he got hit in the crossfire between some local gang members, and he was killed. And so they put out a reward, started searching for these guys, and it turns out, in addition to 2 people that they have arrested in connection with this, they've arrested 2 others, and they're 17-year-olds, but they're going to be charged as adults by the D.C. Federal District Attorney, which is, I'm forgetting her name right now, but she is the one who used to be on Fox News and actually did a really great job of is Judge Jeanine Pirro, yes, who's now the attorney for the District of Columbia. And so it's great. It's important that this is happening, but it's also interesting that after an initial sort of pushback from the mayor of Washington, D.C., mayor's starting to say, actually, this isn't too bad. We're working well together. The local D.C. government is still trying to challenge the Trump administration's work there and trying to have them suspended or expelled. And apparently Congress has not renewed the president's temporary authority to do this, but I think he's made the point loud and clear. And it's super important because now we're talking about Chicago. Now, granted, crime in general is a problem in all of these places, but the operation of ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, to target criminal illegal aliens cannot be and must not be interfered with by anybody locally, and gives perfect standing for the Department of Homeland Security and the president and his powers is to faithfully execute the laws of the United States. This is in Chicago. They've just launched a major ICE operation there, and a lot of criminal illegal aliens flocked to Chicago because it was cool to be a criminal. You can get away with it. Governor doesn't want to do anything about it. The mayor, whose popularity rating, Brandon Johnson in Chicago, is somewhere in the 5% range right now, is claiming that it's an invasion and unconstitutional. I don't think anybody's listening to that guy anymore. And so now DHS has made it clear that they're not going to put up with having sanctuary policies shelter these people anywhere in the United States. And ICE is going to go take the actions they need to. And when they need the National Guard to help them, they will have them. So this is what's happening in Chicago. And more news on that because, of course, there's been, I think, over 50 murders and a couple hundred people injured in just the last week or so in Chicago. Regular crime, which J.B. Pritzker, the governor, who's gigantic guy, he fills the entire screen when you see him, has said, has called anybody who disagrees with him that crime is not a problem in Chicago is an authoritarian, apparently. And so if you disagree with him and you're in Chicago and you hear this, you're an authoritarian according to your own governor. Maybe it's time for that guy to be sent packing. I don't really understand why anybody even listens to him. But every time he opens his mouth, he says something stupid now. And maybe that is the real victory at this point. Let's see. You got one. So, yes, I'm going to talk about Portland here. And yes, I've actually gone for a walk at night in DC, and it was okay. But it has really changed. And now, of course, it's changed back in just weeks. So this is what President Trump's doing nationally. The case is to challenge him. And it's being done with tariffs and all kinds of stuff. And apparently the Supreme Court is going to get the tariff case. And actually, I think the Supreme Court is going to side mostly with the president. They may narrow some of the authority, but I think for the most part, they're going to find that the law leaves open that. In fact, there was judges from both Democrat and Republican appointees who sided with the opinion that disagreed with the circuit court that tried to stop that ruled his tariff powers unconstitutional. But they must not be too sure about it, because they went ahead and gave till mid-October for an appeal to be filed with the Supreme Court on the issue. So I guess let's see what happens with that. And the Democrats, they're way out there, trying to conjure up and create issues. They're doing it from the minority, but they do the same thing, but with more power if they're in the majority. And they just simply must not get back into the majority in the House or the Senate, for that matter. So shifting gears, let's talk about Oregon now. And I'm going to start out with something that actually relates to the stories I just talked about with Los Angeles, DC, and Chicago. So Portland, the ICE building in Portland has been under a military-style siege. And if you haven't seen the video of this, have a look at it. The Portland police have, during these riots, somebody reported on this for Fox News. The Portland police have been accused of abdication of duty after records reveal officers failed to respond to 911 calls, haven't made a single arrest, including for serious acts of violence, outside the Portland ICE facility since mid-June. The area, which is Portland Police's, let me see if I can post this for you, jurisdiction, has been under siege for more than 80 consecutive days. So this area is outside of the building, but it's an area that the Portland police should be taking action. But apparently they've been ordered by the mayor of Portland to do nothing. That's all we can figure out here, because the officers are nowhere to be found and local residents are pleading for help. There's a famous video of a local resident, a black woman, who came out and screamed at the protesters for making constant noise and interfering with the quality of life in her neighborhood. Completely betrayed by the local government. There was some hope that the new mayor of Portland would represent a new direction for what's happening in the city, but apparently he's decided to take the side of ICE. Sorry, not ICE. He's decided to take the side of Antifa. And I think he's going to regret that. And this has led to President Trump starting to talk about taking action to wipe out the riot. And so there's quite a set of actions that might follow here very soon. One of which is the border czar, Tom Homan, said last week, we've got 10,000 more agents coming on. We're going to flood the zone. You're going to see a ramp up of operations in New York, which he said. You're going to see ramp up in LA. Portland, Seattle, all these sanctuary cities refuse to work with ICE. We're going to address that. By the way, there's money in the big, beautiful bill to fund all of this. ICE has been offering $50,000 hiring bonuses for new agents as part of its budget expansion from $8 billion to $28 billion. And of course, $28 billion, you can rack up that entire cost to what President Biden did or allowed to happen during his 4 years in letting people into this country, including an untold number of criminals. President Trump said he would wipe out the Portland rioters. He said last week, and when we go in there, if we go to Portland, we're going to wipe them out. They're going to be gone. They're going to be gone bad. They won't even stand the fight. They will not stay there. They've ruined that city. What they've done to that city, it's like living in hell. And of course, when you go down there and you see what it looks like in the immediate vicinity, and then hear it at night in the neighborhood, this is one of the worst abuses or failure to perform duty that you can imagine. And it will potentially lead to action by President Trump to get rid of the Antifa rioters. And I think that is totally appropriate, because the stuff that they're doing it's assault, it's attack on a law enforcement officer. I mean, at a minimum, it's disrupting the peace. It's wielding deadly weapons. It is interfering with the actions of a federal law enforcement officer. It is attacking federal property. There's so many things that they're going to be able to bring these guys up on charges for. And what they really need to do, the number one goal should be to break the back of Antifa, which is, I think, open to a RICO statute prosecution. They coordinate across state lines. They conspire to create a mass number of crimes as an organization. And so the people that are involved in that organization and directing its activities and its resources in any way, are providing it resources, I think are all going to go down here soon. And I'm pretty sure this is happening as we speak behind the scenes with federal law enforcement. Meanwhile, Senators Wyden and Merkley, Congresswoman Hoyle, Dexter Bonamici, I don't know about Salinas. I haven't heard from her, but the rest of them are all calling ICE a bunch of jackbooted thugs and claiming that they're the ones causing all the problems. I think that that's shameful of our federal representation in Congress. And if you think that's shameful, then stop voting for those people and tell other people what's happening and tell them to stop voting for them, unless they like having rioters run their cities and their political elected officials denigrate law enforcement officers from the federal level who are simply executing the laws, that if these legislators didn't like the laws, they can just go ahead and try to pass new ones. They're in Congress. Maybe they should try. I haven't heard Wyden talking about passing any new laws that are going to change any of this. They just don't want the laws that we have now enforced. The Portland mayor says no help is needed. I have not asked for help and do not need federal intervention yet. Here's what the record shows. And you can read it in the article that I posted. Multiple law enforcement personnel have been injured during the recent Portland ICE riots. 3 independent journalists have been assaulted. The nearby school has been closed due to the riots. That's right. So there's a nearby school that's actually been forced to close because the riots are so severe. That sounds like interference with a state function of education that the state's done nothing to resolve. They just don't really care. And I think we knew they didn't really care if any of these kids got an education. The police are unable to enforce open law breaking that is going on nightly. Unable or unwilling. I guess you'd actually have to find out who's issuing the orders. Residents nearby cannot open their windows because of the tear gas used as riot control and also the large volume of smoke bombs used by the protesters. Local shops are losing business as riots damage windows and chase away customers. ICE protesters have shut down the Portland mayor's recent public speech, forcing him to leave the area. That sounds familiar. That's deja vu all over again. That happened to Ted Wheeler. And when he fled, he thought he was going to go talk to these guys, and somebody threw a brick near his head and he had to get out of there. So free speech is being attacked in Portland. That is a violation of federal constitutional rights. We'll see where that leads. Law enforcement officials have had their names, addresses, and family photos of family members posted online. Doxing. The Multnomah County Chair, Jessica Vega Peterson, said there's no crime problem in Portland. No crime problem. I don't know. It's just utterly laughable. She said that crime has been trending downward overall for multiple years. Well, when you see the downward trend in crime, it was because it reached an incredible multi-decade high just a couple of years ago. So all it's done is it's trended down slightly. And of course, now it may well surge again, at least if it's up to the Portland and Oregon law enforcement who refuse to arrest anybody when openly committing lawbreaking in and around the ICE facility. Also, defunding police, which Portland did, tends to reduce crime data. And that's because fewer officers track the data, and also because fewer officers mean fewer responses to 911 calls. Typical 911 call, unless you're being actively facing a threat to your life, like somebody shooting at you or threatening you with a knife, they're going to just give you a long time period when they're going to maybe come. And if it's a property crime, they're going to just tell you to file it online. On top of that, up until we got a new district attorney, which only happened at the beginning of this year, they were able to reduce crime by simply not charging people in the first place once they were arrested, which is not how you reduce crime. That's not a real reduction in crime. That is a failure to enforce the law. Congresswoman Janelle Bynum has also said there's no crime problem in Portland despite the riots. Bynum said Trump should deploy people to where the real problems are and quit wasting your time and the country's money to play cops and robbers. Play cops and robbers? Well, I guess she knows something about that because back in 2020, she defended Antifa. She did. And so did so many other Democrats. They thought it was fine. And so they're going to get more of what they have defended. That's what they're going to get. But will they be doing it to federal officers? I think for not very long. And so this list that has just been presented to you really emphasizes all the crimes they've been committing. Portland actually called out the National Guard, by the way, against rioters in July and November in 2020, when Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler used National Guard troops to quell rioters on multiple occasions. So why not now? This is where we're at. Yeah, the real insurrectionists are in Portland, and they are actually interfering with federal law. And this is what an insurrection amounts to. They are attacking a federal law enforcement entity. And that actually, by the way, could result in charges even more severe than just the ones I've listed so far. If you start organizing what is an attempt to overthrow the federal rule of law in the state of Oregon, you might find yourself facing real charges, the kind that they never really charged. They tried to charge trespassers on the Capitol grounds with little old ladies in pink sweatpants looking for toilets. And yet we've got these people that are fully armed. They are armored. They are organized in assault brigades attacking the ICE facility. I think they might actually be the ones that are going to face some interference with the federal government and an attempt to organize a rebellion. And by the way, this has been going on for a while. Apparently, the FBI says an Atlanta fugitive may be in Portland, and they've offered a $10,000 reward. This is something that I also saw reported by Andy No. And it's kind of made its way into the mainstream news, which I'm shocked at because usually they ignore this. But the FBI said that a fugitive from Atlanta may be in the area. His name is Ronald Walson, a.k.a. Sarah Walson, a.k.a. Miranda Kyle, a.k.a. Emily Smith, 28 years old, of Kennesaw, Georgia, who's wanted for arson and destruction of government property in 2020. That was established by finding DNA evidence on a firebomb, Molotov cocktail firebomb that he used against a federal facility in 2020. But it turns out that this guy has managed to come to some kind of sanctuary here in the state of Oregon and hide. And he did it cleverly by getting it. He actually got his name changed back in 2023 to a female name, and got his gender changed in his records. And then because somehow he managed to float a fake birth date that was off by a year, they were unable to track him down for a while. So he has been floating around in our state. and they say he's probably changed his appearance. They warn he's armed and dangerous, and he may well be wearing women's clothing. So there you go. This is what Andy Ngo refers to as trans Tifa. And in this case, it's being used cleverly to evade, for several years, federal law enforcement. Of course, it wasn't that hard to evade the Biden administration, who not only wasn't even trying, but frankly, at some point, I think it's safe to say, was actively trying to ignore people like this guy and the stuff that they were doing. And those days are over, folks. They're over. Now, what we have is really just a horrific scourge of criminal activity that's really insurrectionist, that's aimed at federal and interfering with federal law enforcement, and it's operating across multiple states. I think the time has come. And let me see if I can find the Andy Ngo article, because it was actually better than the. Now, here we go. I'm going to post it for you because it's actually excellent. He does the best job. In fact, he does a better job than a lot of law enforcement does. He's that thorough. Yeah, we do have drug cartels here too. Let me see if that gets you some more info. But yeah, you can read the detail of how this guy has managed to evade and actually be involved with other crimes here in Oregon. Apparently, Emily Alice Smith's prior legal name was Graham Michael Smith and not Watson after all. But he says here, but it was a hell of a coincidence that there are two trans violent suspects in Oregon with the same adopted name. So, yeah, this is what they're doing. And I think it's time that we put an end to it once and for all. Shifting gears here, speaking of bad behavior by the left, President Trump, Congressman Bentz in the 2nd District. It's basically all of the eastern half of the state, not including Bend, and extends all the way down into southern Oregon, including places like Jackson and so Medford, Grants Pass, half of Douglas County, that area, Klamath. And so he's always held town halls, a whole bunch of them. But a group that I happen to know is called Indivisible has been going to these town halls and disrupting the meetings, screaming, hostile activity. And they did this a number of years ago when Greg Walden was a congressman during the first Trump administration. And it's mentioned here, Indivisible. Bentz said many of the people attending the meetings are engaged in intentionally disruptive, repetitive, practiced, rude, demeaning behavior, profane language, catcalling, and derisive accusatory statements. Reading from scripts when they do that. So these are organized and prepared disruptions of town halls, which are designed for people to be able to come and ask questions and hear the congressman speak and answer their questions. But instead, they just scream at them. And these groups are small in number relative to the voting population of the 2nd District. They don't represent anywhere more than a small minority of the voters. However, they're very loud and very organized. And apparently they've got lots of time on their hands. So I happen to know that some of the protesters have actually taken aim at some Democrats, which I think is actually appropriate because those Democrats are getting some of their own medicine. It's what happens when you soft pedal and talk in glowing terms for the longest time about the peaceful protesters that are actually rioters and Antifa militants. And they now might be experiencing the consequences of that. So I support Congressman Bentz's decision. I think he'll probably end up doing a different kind of uh, a different kind of town hall where people who have authentic, sincere questions will get to do this, will get to ask questions, but they might be virtual because these in-person ones, which are important, but they can't be done if people just come in there and they just scream, which means they're just a stone's throw, literally, short of what Antifa is. Because once they start throwing things and getting violent, which is entirely possible. Although I noticed a lot of the indivisible people seem to be in their 60s, 70s, and even older. So maybe, kind of that old white angry hippie types. That's what you're getting in the indivisible groups. And I guess this is what we have come to expect is the younger ones, the 30s and 40-year-olds, often trans are the Antifa types, but now the older ones, as I just described, are indivisible. There's a bit of a controversy here in Oregon about the latest COVID-19 vaccine. And it has to do with recent change by the Federal Food and Drug Administration, which recently authorized updated COVID-19 vaccines, but only for adults over 65 or anyone younger than 65 with certain health conditions, which are, by the way, the only ones who have ever been vulnerable to COVID, because those certain health conditions usually are the underlying health conditions that have those complexities that they've tried to address with COVID vaccines. However, there's also tons of questions that are still being asked and will hopefully be answered about the nature of the COVID vaccines across the larger, healthier adult and children population. And so the FDA isn't providing formal vaccine guidance to doctors at this point. That's been left to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. There's a vaccine advisory committee that's been formed of actual experts. I've heard HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who got rid of the previous committee, which was a rubber stamp for the idiots of the Biden policies, and appointed new ones who are actual scientists and but experts in vaccines, and they are formulating these recommendations. But under Oregon law, pharmacists are only allowed to administer vaccines included in the state protocol set up by the Board of Pharmacy. So apparently what's going to happen now is the Oregon Health Authority and Tina Kotek are going to come in and start issuing their own advisory opinions. Feels like a little bit of a Back to the Future moment in some ways. It does. Because now the Democrats are going to go back. I mean, everybody has seen it. And of course, by the way, there's been an open admission by the vaccine companies themselves about the nature of the effectiveness of the vaccines in stopping the spread of COVID or preventing it. And I think that debate going on right now should continue. But the Democrats kind of want to just go ahead and be their own federal government. And they formed, by the way, a West Coast Health Alliance so that they can safeguard access to the COVID vaccines. It's Washington, California, and Oregon, which kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because that's the same group that tried to make sure that you were imprisoned into your home and that they tried to impose vaccine mandates on you back in 2021 and 2022. So Back to the Future, like I said, is what you're experiencing now. So watch for that. Meanwhile, receiving almost no attention whatsoever from Oregon's leadership, much less the governor Kotek, is that there are now more unemployed people than there are jobs available in the U.S. However, Oregon, the situation is the most severe in the country. We're ranked third for the most unemployment claims per 100,000 people in the workforce. And we've been warning about this because major companies are laying people off here in Oregon, and there aren't new jobs coming in and being generated at this moment in time. Intel, Daimler, Nike, and several companies have just picked up and left, like Dutch Brothers. And that's not counting all the small businesses that have decided that they just can't continue to sustain this and are leaving the state. So unemployment claims increased 12% over the previous week. Oregon unemployment claims were also more than 30% higher than the same period last year. This has received no attention from our state's governing officials. And I don't know if that it ever will until they lose an election. And you can have a look at this. I'm posting the link to the statistics, but that just serves to underscore the problem here, which is in this state, uh, they don't really think they have to solve or address the problems that truly concern people. Meanwhile, Oregon, according to a Realtor.com article, Oregon is 45th in the country for housing production and availability. You see, Governor Kotek promised that she was going to construct 36,000 housing units by 2025. Currently, the projection suggests that Oregon is only on track to produce a disastrous 11,184 units, only 31% of the governor's goal. Now, there are legislative efforts underway to pass some reforms to the zoning laws, but apparently it's the government itself is actually in the way of fast tracking housing development. And we've heard no leadership from the governor on this one, much less the Democrats running the state. And there is a critical worker shortage for housing inspectors. As we know, there's also a problem with very detailed bureaucratic housing inspection processes. But, they are so slow to cut the red tape and reform the zoning laws that at some point you have to say that maybe this is an intentional set of acts by the state government. They're actually 45th out of 51, which includes the District of Columbia, because they don't really care or they want it that way. By the way, the median home price in Oregon is $563,896. And so in terms of affordability, we're near the bottom of the list with Connecticut, California, Hawaii, New York, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. May I point out, every one of those states has Democrat control defining all of its policies. So this is Oregon. And this is why, we suck. Or I always liked the mask that said, "My governor is an idiot." Mask that was always somehow super appropriate. And by the way, that median housing home price, that's not counting the fact that the interest rates mean your monthly payments 3 times what it was just 5 years ago. So not only is the price high, and the availability low, but the interest rates are high. And President Trump wants those to come down. Democrats, I'm not sure they're rooting for that at this point. And in Clatsop County, they're admitting that they were just going to have to do more with less housing because, and this is with regard to shelter beds and not the kind of general housing that people need, but for the people that are described as experiencing homelessness. And this is a story specifically that's mentioned in this article. And again, really the biggest problem hasn't been that they are experiencing homelessness. They're experiencing fentanyl addiction. So that is mentioned in the article, but it's going to be interesting to see how they resolve this because they're not going to be able to do it with the amount of money they've had up until now. Some political news to share with you. And this is a major development in some ways. Congressman Cyrus Javadi, he voted for Governor Kotek's $1 billion gas tax and wage bill this past month. And he was the key deciding vote that helped the Democrats pass that package and stick it to all of you. Raising your gas tax by another 6 cents after the gas tax has been raised significantly in the past. So even though gas prices come down, that means but this is a set amount of 46 cents. So it's a higher percentage every day, more and more of your what you're paying for a gallon of gas. And but he's announced that he is switching parties to register as a Democrat. And you know, I guess this is he must not have been a very serious Republican if he so easily, after one issue, votes um, with Democrats, and then decides he is a Democrat. And he has insane Facebook post which says that he has had, quote, had enough, unquote, and refuses to go along with a party that does not care about freedom of speech, fixing infrastructure, and keeping hospitals open. What the hell is he talking about? Freedom of speech? I think he must be talking about the trans books in the library and the inappropriate books that could not be read in the legislature because they were so offensive that they were not allowed to be read, even though they were voting on whether to continue to allow them for kids. And does not want to fix infrastructure. Well, you know who else does want to fix infrastructure? The Democrats, who are actually in charge and have not been fixing infrastructure. They've just been charging you more for it. So this is maybe what is supposed to happen. He says that he's done fighting with the Republican Party. Now he's going to join the Democrats. And he says he's running for re-election, and he says he has the full support of the Democrat caucus in Salem. You can read the details of what he said here, but I think that this is another power grab by the Democrats. I say good riddance to the guy if he actually is this confused about what being a Republican is. And if he is so excited about what the Democrats are doing, why did he run as a Republican in the first place? I just don't get it. He says he wants safe neighborhoods. Yeah, I don't know that the Democrats are experts on safe neighborhoods. He should ask all the people who are saying that they just don't have enough money to deal with people experiencing fentanyl addiction. Where is he on that issue? Anyway, that's the latest from that one. And then there is somebody who's entered the race for governor to unseat Tina Kotek. She is a Republican, Danielle Bethel. She is a member of the county commission in Marion County. She's on her second term there. She's a fifth-generation Oregonian, and she's been the head of the Kaiser Chamber of Commerce in the past. She's a former school board member and a business owner in Marion County. They own Bethel Plumbing, which specializes in new construction and remodels. And you can check out this interview with on coin.com as she describes what she's doing as she runs. She's right now, as far as I know, the only declared candidate on the Republican side for governor. And so it's probably worth starting to tune in and pay attention to this because we may see more filings coming in the coming weeks and months. The legislature, in other election news, has changed the filing deadlines for incumbents. The first day to file for the May primary is September 11th, which is this Thursday. It's the first day anybody can actually go and file for office. However, the deadline to file in March, let's see, the deadline for the 2026 primary election for partisan positions will be March 3rd for incumbent candidates. It will be March 10th for all the other candidates. I suspect this has to do with people filing and then withdrawing and things like that. You know, I guess they would just want to make it so that people can see who's actually planning to run again if they are, and if they aren't, then people can challenge them, or to see who does file and then challenge them. Anyway, I don't know. Let's see how this works out. I'd like to believe that this is a positive development, but I'm always suspicious of anything that the Oregon legislature does with our election system, because they've had the tendency to make it worse and not better. But I think this could be an element of transparency. We'll see. Anyway, that kind of is a wrap up of all of the news that I wanted to cover tonight. I do have one last piece of news which you actually might rather enjoy. And there's two things I want to share with you. The Fed governor, and tell me if you agree that there's a DEI element to these qualifications for the Fed governor that President Trump has just fired. Her name's Lisa Cook. She does not want to raise interest rates, does not want to lower interest rates, but I think that maybe she's not qualified for the position in the first place. And that's in addition to the issue which has come forward of mortgage fraud. There we go. I got the link to work. And then let's see. Lastly, there was one. So there are 4 swing states that have broken party membership records: Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. That Republicans are breaking records. That people are switching from Democrat to Republican in those states. Those are battleground states. And this is happening in a year following a presidential election, which is interesting because it must mean the Democrats are doing something wrong and still doing something wrong, or Republicans are providing a proper contrast and a better alternative. In the year after President Trump has won election, I think it's the best party registration for Republicans in those states in 20 years or more. That's not time to go and start celebrating and go back and figure the world is saved. It means that actually eternal vigilance must continue here, because if this can happen there, it can happen in Oregon too, at least in key districts and in places where it can make a difference. So let's think about it, because we've got to offer that contrast when people can see that what they're getting from Democrats is what's hurting them, and Republicans are fixing things. We can even make Oregon great again too. And thank you for the compliments on the hat. Yes, I just got it this last weekend, and I promise to bring forward more hats. This is the first one. I've got another one that I'll bring forward on another day. Meanwhile, thank you for taking the time to watch The Captive Audience tonight. I hope this is informative, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode of The Captive Audience. And please share this with somebody who just wants to hear what's happening in their state, hear the contrast with other states, and hear what is going wrong and what's going right and who's doing something about it, so that maybe we have a chance of making Oregon great again. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.